welcome to the fourth vlog in the All About Austen read-along series. This has been the Jane Austen book that I've been most excited to make a reading vlog for because it is without a shadow of a doubt my favourite Jane Austen novel, and also the one that really transformed my view of her works and her writing style and made me into a proper Jane Austen fan. Although I'd read Jane Austen novels before and enjoyed them, and certainly I'd never read one and actively disliked it, I also hadn't truly fallen in love with one of her books before. But then I picked up this book and everything changed, and it not only was just a firm favourite of mine from the very moment that I started it, but it also really opened my eyes to how Jane Austen's writing style is just so clever, and it just wasn't something I'd ever appreciated before reading this novel. And so I opened up this book and suddenly was just able to appreciate the way that she combines humour and social book avalanche. Whoa there. From the top, I was able to appreciate how she combined her humour and her wit and her really just funny characters with some really deep and quite poignant social commentary in a way that makes a book both entertaining and really impactful, and really makes you think about society and the way that the values of that society have either changed in modern society or in a lot of cases are still prevalent but in different ways. And it really just opened my eyes to how well she combines that entertainment and impact factor, and I just suddenly had such an appreciation for Jane Austen's works, went back and reread some of her other books and suddenly just found that I was enjoying them way more. So this book really changed it all for me, and it is of course Emma, my absolute favourite. Emma Woodhouse I just think is such a great protagonist, and we will of course be talking about her a lot throughout this reading vlog, but from the very beginning I just think that she is very relatable in the sense that she is not perfect. She has a lot of positive attributes, but she can also be judgmental and rude and just have her prejudices, and I think that's something that we can all relate to. So I think compared to some of her more pious, perfect and moral protagonists like Fanny Price from Mansfield Park that we just read, I just find Emma to be a lot funnier and also a lot more relatable. So I for one am absolutely filled to the brim with excitement about rereading this novel. I think it's going to be a really great time. As always, I like to show you which editions of the novel I have at the start of these reading vlogs. So of course I have this one, which is a Penguin Deluxe Classic. It is not my favourite Penguin Deluxe Classic, I'm not going to lie to you, but actually I find that there are not loads and loads of Emma covers that I love, which is a shame because I love the book so much, but I've never found a cover that I absolutely fell in love with. So I have this one, and then I also have the one that I have a full collection of Jane Austen novels. So this one was printed in the 60s. Jay got me the full collection for my birthday, and those are the only two copies of Emma that I have, which is a shame, and I definitely want to grow my collection, but equally I only really want to buy new ones if it's ones that's either an old version that's really special to have or a beautiful cover. So I'm always keeping my eyes out whenever I'm in, especially secondhand bookshops, but just bookshops in general. But for now, this is the copy that I'm going to be reading from, and it is a lovely copy nonetheless. So Jane Austen, Emma, here we go. Now I actually am starting this vlog on a Wednesday morning, kind of random, but I'm actually going down to Norwich today for a work trip. I'll be staying overnight and then coming back up to York tomorrow. I've never been to Norwich before, but I'm going there for work, and because I'll be on the train for a couple of hours, I'm going to bring Emma along with me and read it as I travel. So I'll catch up with you later on and see what Norwich has to offer, because I really don't know anything about it as a place, but Emma will be keeping me company, and I'll catch up with you when I've done some reading. morning guys. So I'm in my hotel room, obviously away from my little work trip, and this hotel room is not nice, or at least it's not in a very nice area, a little bit sketchy, not a big fan, but I think that's a story for another day. But either way, it's currently about 6 o'clock in the morning on Thursday now, and yesterday afternoon was super busy with work stuff. Then we went out for dinner in the evening, which was lovely, so I haven't had a chance to update you on Emma. But on the train down yesterday, I did manage to read up to page 55, and I have loads of quotes that I want to share with you all, but obviously because it's so early, I don't want to talk too loudly, so I think I'll save them for when I get home later on today. But I did just kind of want to mention that I am loving this reread already. I was wondering, you know, obviously I said at the beginning of this vlog that Emma has always been my favourite of her novels, but equally I've never read all of her novels in such close succession, and so I was wondering whether my opinion of it or whatever would be like slightly different when I'm comparing it so closely to her other novels that I'm reading every month in publication order. But no, in the first 50 pages I'm just absolutely loving it. I think some of her other novels can take a little bit longer to sort of like get into the plot, or at least to like warm up to the characters, whereas like right from the beginning I feel like you understand the dynamic of Emma, and kind of like in the way that I would describe Emma, I'd say that she is kind of like the sun, and she sees herself as the sun, but actually other people treat her as the sun as well, and then everyone else kind of like orbits around her, and that kind of dynamic is established from very, very early on in the novel. So I feel like you understand everything that's going on from that perspective, and it's just so interesting. So like I said, lots of quotes to share with you all later when I can talk at normal volume, but for now I'm just about to head down and meet one of my colleagues for breakfast in the hotel, and then we'll be heading out for another day of work stuff and then getting back on the train later on this evening. So I'll catch up with you after doing some more train reading today. So I'm now back at home, finished my work trip, which on the whole was really enjoyable. The hotel, as I alluded to, was unpleasant to say the least in location, and also in some of the noises and smells that I was subjected to. Unpleasant hotel experience, but the rest of the work trip was really nice, and most of all it was lovely to meet my colleagues, because I've obviously just started a new job in the last couple of months and everyone is working remotely. I'll be working remotely like forever because I don't live anywhere near the office, but it was nice to have an opportunity to meet all of the people that I've been like communicating with over Teams and Zoom for the last few months. So that was lovely, and on the whole really enjoyed the trip, although by the end of it I was exhausted because travelling on the Wednesday and then back on the Thursday and lots of work things in between, it's just very tiring, even though it was enjoyable. So on the train back on Thursday, it's now Saturday I should point out, I have to say I didn't do any more reading of Emma because I was travelling back quite late, so instead I got myself a hot chocolate from Starbucks, an oat milk hot chocolate, and just listened to music on the way back, because when it's dark and I'm reading, I have a tendency to fall asleep, and I did not want to fall asleep on the train and miss any of my stops, so instead I decided to just listen to music and drink hot chocolate. But I'm now back home. It is Saturday. I spent yesterday just recovering my energy, didn't really do any reading, but today I'm very excited to dive back into Emma. Now, as promised, I did want to talk about some of my favourite things about the novel that I didn't have the volume to be able to talk about in the hotel. So the first thing is just the introduction of all of the characters. As I've said, I think is so expansive on who they are, and like you sort of get a really great insight into the characters without really saying too much. So Emma, for example, is introduced in the very first line of the novel as Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever and rich, with a comfortable home and a happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. And I just love that description, because obviously she's very privileged, and I just think that sentence almost entirely explores who she is and gives you, the reader, an understanding, like a very clear understanding of how her life until this point of her existence has then shaped her view of the world, and you so clearly understand that from the very, very earliest point of the novel. And then meanwhile, just a few pages later, we're introduced to Mr. Knightley, who is kind of like the only person not even kind of like, he is the only person in this novel who will actively challenge Emma and encourages her to become a better person. So we see how she is both attracted to that in the sense of like she enjoys being challenged like sort of intellectually by Mr. Knightley, but also you can see why she is sometimes sort of like frosty with him because she is used to being just like affirmed by everyone else around her, and so this sort of concept of being challenged is very, very alien to her by comparison to how everyone else just like encourages her to do whatever she wants. So I absolutely love that. And then that is kind of like countered by the introduction of Harriet Smith, Emma's friend throughout the novel, who is exactly what Mr. Knightley is not, in the sense that she just constantly encourages Emma to view herself as this font of all knowledge, and she basically just boosts Emma's ego to no end, which I just think is hilarious because Mr. Knightley sees that in them and recognises that it's probably not going to be a very positive friendship, but no one else does. Emma probably recognises the fact that Harriet does just boost her ego and yet enjoys it, so chooses not to do anything about it. So I just really, really enjoy seeing that challenge that Mr. Knightley offers, and I think it's amazing that he is in the novel from pretty much the very beginning, because some of her other sort of male protagonists, I guess, don't get introduced to the story, or like we don't get to know them very well until later on in the novel. So it's nice, I think, that we get to see Mr. Knightley and get to know him almost in as much detail as we do Emma, which I think is really great. So yeah, I think that's probably the long and short of what I wanted to say. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Obviously I know this is my favourite Austen, so there's no surprise about the fact that I'm enjoying it, but it is fun now knowing the entirety of the novel, which obviously I didn't the first time around, being able to spot those little sort of hints of what characters will become and sort of seeing how cleverly Jane Austen builds the characters right from the start. So, like I said, it is Saturday now. I've actually just been out to do some Christmas shopping, by which I mean I went to one shop and bought one thing and then did 2 coffee shops either side of the one shop. So I've done a little bit of shopping. It is now the afternoon, although it seems to be getting dark already. It's like 2:30 and it's already like definitely getting dark. It's very rainy, very cozy, and that makes it the perfect time to get on with reading some more of this novel. So I will catch up with you later. I don't really know if it was that visible in that clip, but it's actually snowing currently. It's freezing cold today, so naturally I'm in my pyjamas because I'm not going back out today, and the heating is on full whack, although the boiler, you might be able to hear, is currently making a noise that sounds a little bit like it's struggling, which is concerning because I could really do with the boiler not breaking when it's cold outside. But I'm also going to have a hot water bottle, a cup of tea, and then settle down to read Emma. But I just had to try and capture that snow because it's November and it's snowing, which is kind of wild, but kind of here for it now that I don't have to be outside. Excuses, but I really do find it so hard to read when it is dark. I just find that I like switch off so much more easily and find myself drifting off to sleep, and it's really, really difficult to read at night time for me, which you'll see evidenced in literally every single 24-hour readathon I ever do. I'm always falling asleep like as soon as it gets dark, which is very unfortunate given that now it's winter. It seems to be dark for quite a large portion of the day, which means that last night, although I did do some reading of Emma, as soon as it started getting dark I just found that I could not focus, and because I love this book so much I didn't want to like sort of find myself reading little bits and then falling asleep and then not realising where I was. I wanted to appreciate this book in its entirety. So last night I made it to page 100 and 24, which is the start of volume 2 in this edition, and I read one of my favourite segments. So although I didn't read as much as I'd hoped to, it was one of my favourite bits of Emma, so I guess it's not all negative. So the bit that I just read was at the very end of volume 1. And Emma and a few people from her family have gone off to see Mrs. Weston at her house, Randalls. They're there for dinner. There's Mr. Knightley, Mr. Elton, Emma, her sister's husband, her dad. It's a big family affair and it's all a great time until it starts snowing, and Emma's dad is a very anxious person, and likewise her sister seems to have taken after her dad in that respect. So they're both very keen to get back to Hartfield as soon as possible and not get trapped. So immediately there's a lot of like excitement and drama and tension about sort of getting back before it snows too heavily, which first of all felt very on brand for last night, given that it was actually snowing here and it felt very like wintry, and it was nice to be able to relate to the characters and their experience, although I was of course already at home so I didn't have to worry about getting trapped anywhere. But besides, it was very like exciting and dramatic, and Emma ends up going back in a carriage with Mr. Elton. So Mr. Elton is like the vicar or like the priest or like the parson, I'm not sure what the official terminology is, but he's like the religious guy in the town that they live in. And Emma has been trying to matchmake Mr. Elton and Harriet, her friend, because she thinks they would be a perfect match, and she believes that Mr. Elton has been showing interest in and is in love with Harriet. So they get in this carriage together, and Emma is kind of like hoping to use this as an opportunity to sort of matchmake, sort of like seal the match off and have it be a done deal. And then the terminology used is what makes this such an amusing piece of the novel, because it's just such a funny way to phrase things. So Emma is in this carriage with Mr. Elton, and it says, she found her subject cut up, her hand seized, her attention demanded, and Mr. Elton actually making violent love to her, availing himself of the precious opportunity, declaring sentiments which must already be well known, hoping, fearing, adoring, ready to die if she refused him, but flattering himself that his ardent attachment and unequalled love and exampled passion could not fail of having some effect. And I just thought the phrase of making violent love, which obviously just means that he was like passionately professing his feelings to Emma, but just the way that it's phrased I just think is hilarious. But yeah, I love that bit, and it's one of my favourite bits of the film as well, because you can just tell how little Emma was expecting it, and she is a very, very clever character, and she's got so many like sort of talents and wisdoms, and she's like definitely like above a lot of people in her intellect, and yet in her ability to perceive how people perceive her, she's kind of lacking. And so she was so set on the match that she wanted to be accurate, and that she wanted Harriet and Mr. Elton to work out, that she couldn't see what was right in front of her, and so she was completely shocked and bowled over by this scenario. And I just think it's so funny to sort of see that she, although is like very, very clever, has some gaps in her knowledge or her willingness to see how people perceive her. And then in the section that I just read as well, there were also some really interesting discussions on Emma and her willingness to get married, which I just think is so interesting, given that for most of Jane Austen's protagonists, marriage is like a given prospect, because they need marriage as a way to sort of climb socially and to secure their future, whereas as we see with Emma, we know 100% that she never has to get married because she is very wealthy, she has a great position in her family home, and so her view on marriage is very, very different and is actually only going to be influenced by love. So she says, I have none of the usual inducements of women to marry. Were I to fall in love, indeed it would be a different thing, but I have never been in love, it is not my way or my nature, and I do not think I ever shall, and without love I am sure I should be a fool to change a situation such as mine. Fortune I do not want, employment I do not want, consequence I do not want. I believe a few married women are half as much mistress of their husband's house as I am of Hartfield, and never could I expect to be so truly beloved and important, so always first and always right in any man's eyes as I am in my father's. And I just think it's really interesting to see that like alternate perspective to what we get in Jane Austen's other novels, sort of seeing someone who has the privilege to view marriage in such a way that she can make decisions based solely on her feelings and love, whereas for many of Jane Austen's other protagonists and characters even in this novel, other than Emma, have to marry it's just not even a question because it's so essential to their future and their circumstance. So I think it's really interesting to see that alternative perspective and sort of see the other side to what we get in many of her novels. So volume 2 is where I'm at right now. I have got quite a busy day ahead of me today, so I'm not sure how much reading I'm going to be able to do, but I'm going to try and get in a few pages here and there and keep plodding along with my reread of Emma, which I am very clearly enjoying. I know this isn't a festive vlog, lots of festive vlogs are to follow after this as we officially get into the Christmas season, but can we just take a moment to express some excitement about the fact that today is Tuesday the 30th of November, meaning that December and Christmas officially start tomorrow. I can't wait, I'm so excited, and I just needed to express that in this vlog, especially because that is a key motivator for the fact that I'm putting out into the universe right now that this evening I am going to finish reading Emma. I've done a good bit of reading before work this morning, I'm just about to start work, and then my plan is to just start reading as soon as I finish work this evening and get this book done and dusted because I wanted to finish it before Christmas starts. And by before Christmas starts, I mean before December 1st, which means I need to finish it today. But I have less than 100 pages left to go. I'm on page 300 and this book has just under 400 pages. So I think it's more than achievable to finish it this evening. And more to the point, I can't wait to finish it because I'm just enjoying this reading experience so much. Having now had like such a direct ability to compare this novel to Jane Austen's, previous 3 novels that I've literally just read, I do truly believe that this is her funniest book. Like, I know I'm probably a little bit biased because it is my favourite, but I think the humour of this novel is what makes it so likeable to me, and so I think they are one and the same. Because it's her funniest, it is my favourite, and likewise it's my favourite and it is undoubtedly her funniest novel. And for me at least, it might just be a sense of like what my humour is, but I think that this book is so funny because it is so founded on just a basis of miscommunication in every possible way, and I think the way that all of these characters miscommunicate with both themselves and each other is just so undoubtedly funny. Emma in particular is like the queen of miscommunication and misunderstanding, which is really interesting because she is so clever and very accomplished in lots of ways, and yet she has set herself out as this matchmaker, and I think has these visions of what she thinks would be an ideal circumstance and can't really see anything out of her view of what is ideal, and so she misses a lot of cues that are right beneath her nose just because they don't fit with what her view of idealism is. So we see this with Mr. Elton and her feelings towards her, we see this with Harriet and Robert Martin, we see this with Frank Churchill as a really key example, and it's so interesting to see how Mr. Knightley kind of balances that out, because Emma often sort of like brushes aside his views and his observations and thinks it's rude of him to think that just because he's older than her he has more knowledge, but what time really does tell is that that is the case. He does have a better perception of people and of circumstances and of relationships. So what I've just read right now is like the perfect example, because there's like a little bit of flirtation going on, of course, between Emma and Frank Churchill, and she's enjoying it in quite like a casual way, but Mr. Knightley thinks that there is something deeper going on, and he says to Emma here on page 284 in my copy, "My dear Emma," he said with earnest kindness, "do you think you perfectly understand the degree of acquaintance between the gentleman and the lady we have been speaking of? Have you never at any time had reason to think that he admired her or that she admired him?" And Emma really just cannot see what he's getting at, and so Mr. Knightley is in a very kind way trying to sort of broaden Emma's view of the people that are in front of her and sort of make her see that just because she sees a certain character in one way, that doesn't mean everyone else does, but she's just so blind to that and is very naive. Although she's very clever, she can be very naive, and so I think that's super interesting, and I just love seeing that like blossoming of that back and forth between those two characters. Then the other thing I wanted to mention is, of course, I mentioned earlier that Mr. Elton I think is a hilarious character, and I especially love how he's brought to life by Josh O'Connor. in the newer movie adaptation, but Mrs. Elton is a character who I dislike in both book and film. She's just so insufferable, and in this circumstance especially, I feel like Emma's judgments are just completely on point because she really dislikes her from the very start, and other people, although they try to be nice to her, I think very quickly become accustomed to the fact that she's quite insufferable. So Mrs. Elton is trying to insist that she will invite a load of people to spend the day at Mr. Knightley's house, and then Mr. Knightley says, "No," he calmly replied, "there is but one married woman in the world whom I can ever allow to invite what guests she pleases to Donwell, and that one is..." And then he's interrupted by Mrs. Elton saying, "Mrs. Weston, I suppose," interrupted Mrs. Elton, rather mortified. And then Mr. Knightley, just so quick-witted but without any malice, just says, "No, Mrs. Knightley, until she is in being, I will manage such matters myself." So he's basically saying, don't presume to make yourself like my wife in my house. There is no wife yet, but that will be the only lady who can take that kind of like control in this scenario. And he, unlike Emma, who can be a bit more snippy and rude and calculating, I think Mr. Knightley just has this air of respect about him where he doesn't say anything that's rude, he doesn't say anything untoward, but his words have such power, and they're just so exciting to see when he chooses his moments very, very carefully, and that makes them all the better when they do turn up. So 100 pages, or just under 100 pages left to go of Emma. Gonna start work now, but I am planning to do some reading by the Christmas tree this evening, because yes, we did put our Christmas tree up last night on the 29th of November, and I'm so happy about it. So I'm going to do some cosy reading by the Christmas tree, and I'll catch up with you hopefully with some concluding thoughts on Jane Austen's best novel. All it takes to get me to focus on a book is actually just to cut off my access to the internet entirely. It is now after work on Tuesday evening, internet is still off, the BT men have left the street, so it's going to be at least until tomorrow now until the internet is back on, RIP to me. But that does mean that I have sat down for the last hour after finishing work and really just dug into Emma, and I've just finished up my reread, and I'm very happy to confirm that this remains by far my favourite Jane Austen novel. I was fairly confident going into this Austen read-along that Emma would 100% be my favourite forevermore, but equally I was intrigued to see how it would sit in my ranking when I was reading it in such close proximity to all of the other ones, and whether that would sort of like refresh my opinion. And while I am loving all of Austen's novels, I just find this one to be near flawless in my opinion. I just think it is so great, so funny, creates such an interesting dynamic of social commentaries, and I just love how it brings all of these things together in a way that I think is probably her best developed story. Now the reason I say that is because as I've gotten to the end of two of her other novels, those were Sensibility and Mansfield Park, I was left with the feeling of just being rushed to a conclusion without real explanation or investment in the outcome that the characters were getting into. And even in Pride and Prejudice, to an extent, I felt as though we had this very, very like extensive build-up and then a really, really quick conclusion. In Pride and Prejudice, I certainly felt it was like better managed and there was more explanation and it was easier to be invested in the outcome of the two main characters, whereas in Sense and Sensibility and Mansfield Park, it literally just felt like she'd spent so long developing these characters and their relationships to one another, and then at the very last second just threw in a conclusion and was like, there you go, the end. Whereas in Emma, I really do feel like the romance that we are building up to is really established from the very, very start. It's probably like one of the OG friends to lovers tropes, and I just think it's done so well in the way that we just very, very slowly see this blossoming of a relationship. And what is so wonderful is how these characters themselves slowly come to realise how they feel about each other romantically. It wasn't like it was always there as a romantic prospect. So I just think it is so well managed and so well developed in a way that feels really authentic and natural, and that stands out to me in not only the romances of this novel but also in the way that the characters develop and better understand themselves. And I think the reason I love Emma, I mentioned at the beginning, is because she is unreservedly herself, and she is sometimes judgmental, she can be rude, she can be sort of snobbish, and I just think it's nice to see that in a character, in the sense that she is a lovely person in many ways, but she also has flaws, and it's really nice, especially in a novel that focuses on a female protagonist written at the time when this novel was, to see a woman that isn't entirely perfect or entirely bad. She has just got this authenticity about her, and I think authentic is probably like one of the key words that comes up for me when thinking about why I love Emma so much. And so we see in Emma this really authentic maturing of a character. And I recently listened to Taylor Swift's new album. Well, it wasn't a new album, it was the re-release of the Red album. And there is a song on that album, one of the vault tracks, called Nothing New, and there's a line in that which says, how can a person know everything at 18 but nothing at 22? And Emma is this character who is 21, and she sort of has this air of knowing absolutely everything at the beginning of the novel, and she really is super confident. And as we see her character develop throughout the novel, we see this incredible humbling of her, and I just feel like it really speaks to that line from the song Nothing New, because she sort of like is, in a less dramatic way than in that song and in a less negative way, sort of allowing herself to open up to the fact that she actually doesn't know everything and that that's okay, and that actually this bravado of having to know everything has caused her many, many problems. And so I just think we see this incredible maturing of our main character. I think a lot of people dislike Emma, but I truly think she is one of Austen's most realistic and most relatable protagonists, at least for me personally. And I just think it's really nice to see her development throughout the novel and see how she comes to understand herself a lot better. And then, like I said, I love how she bounces off of other characters around her, especially Mr. Knightley, and it is just so amazing. So, what this book, and I guess what those sections, what I've just said about this novel and the bits that I love so much kind of accumulate in volume 3 in a section where Emma makes some really rude comments to Miss Bates, who is obviously a bit of a clown character in the novel. She is like a lovely old spinster who talks and talks and talks and talks and is really annoying, but is also just really, really lovely. And Emma makes a joke to her when they are all out at a little like picnic, and they're making a joke about saying 3 things that are dull, and Miss Bates says that I need not be uneasy, 3 things very dull indeed, that will do for me, you know, I shall be sure to say 3 dull things as soon as I ever open my mouth, shan't I? And she's making it like a self-effacing joke, and then Emma could not resist saying, ah ma'am, but there may be difficulty, pardon me, but you'll be limited as to number, only 3 at once. And is just really cruelly sort of making fun of the fact that she talks all the time and sort of makes her then suddenly conscious of that part of her personality. And Mr. Knightley, as I've mentioned before, the only person who is willing to put Emma in her place, says, how could you be so unfeeling to Miss Bates? How could you be so insolent in your wit to a woman of her character, age and situation? Emma, I had not thought it possible. She felt your full meaning, she has talked of it since. I wish you could have heard how she talked of it, with what candour and generosity. I wish you could have heard her honouring your forbearance. And then she also is sort of criticised then by Mr. Knightley for not recognising her own privilege and her own position of fortune in making fun of someone who is significantly less well off than her financially and therefore is, you know, less well respected socially. So I just think that is like the key turning point in the novel. So that happens in the beginning of volume 3, and then later on Emma just has had this complete change of self-perception and she can suddenly see herself in the way that potentially Mr. Knightley sees her. And this, I think, is the point of her character having completely transformed into a much humbler and mature young lady, because she says, with unsufferable vanity she had believed herself in the secrets of everybody's feelings, with unpardonable arrogance proposed to arrange everyone's destiny. She was proved to have been universally mistaken, and she had not quite done nothing, for she had done mischief. And I just think those two sections really are like transformative in the novel and kind of sum up why it's so great, because you really just see the characters going through it all, and then like the learning process feels very natural because you see them go through this experience and then learning from it, and then the understanding of their actions and their personalities, and I just think it's great. So with that said, finished Emma, and I'm kind of sad about it, to be honest, because it's just such a great novel. I read it for the first time last year in 2020. I've obviously reread it in 2021, and I'm officially putting it out there. This is going to be an annual occurrence in terms of rereading Emma, because I just think it is such a lovely book, and I just think it's amazing. So with that said, I'm going to bring this reading vlog to an end. The live show for Emma is going to be taking place in the second weekend of December. Further details will follow in the Discord, so if you are not part of the Discord for the All About Austen read along, then click the link in the description box to go ahead and join, because that is where you can chat about your thoughts on the books and also find out about live shows and submit questions, etc. I'm also very, very, very happy to say that the guest joining me for the Emma live show is going to be Morgan from the channel Morgan Long. I feel like I talk about Morgan quite often. She's been in a few favourites videos of mine, and I just think her content is wonderful, but she is a fellow Jane Austen fan, and we're going to be getting together to talk all things Emma. And one thing that I haven't talked about in this vlog, but we will be talking about in the live show, is the movie, the absolutely wonderful movie adaptation from 2020, I believe it was released in, and it is the one with, of course, Anya Taylor-Joy, my love. She is incredible. So all of that is to come in the live show, but for now I hope you have enjoyed hearing me talk about my favourite Jane Austen novel. I hope to hear some of your thoughts in the comments below, because I could talk about Emma until the cows come home. But for now, probably going to go and pick up another book because I've got no internet, so I've got nothing else to do. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.